All right, another day, another envelope. How do you listen for detail? Well, detail. Well, that's
How
pretty
do you listen for detail?
How?
Yeah, how? Well, in general, like, what do we do to pick out detail and whatever? Recording a system, a change in the system, I guess, that would be a good way to look at it. Right? What is detail? I mean, we should start defining what is detail.
Because you can't take a picture. Right? You can't do an A-B comparison. And so I think a lot of people, it's easy to convince yourself that there either isn't a difference or there's a bigger difference than there really is. And it's really difficult to prove either way.
Well, I think for one, you got to start with a track you know very, very well.
It helps.
You've heard it, you know it, every specific element of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just judge something on something you never heard on detail, really.
It helps to have some reference point.
You have no reference, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing.
Personally, for me, I don't like doing my own listening, knowing what changes occurred. It's too difficult to guarantee you're mitigating all your internal biases.
You're a very objective individual.
Right.
That's what engineering does to you.
The problem is, if you're looking for something that's very minor, very trivial change,
Yeah.
it's challenging to be 100% certain that you could absolutely discern the change in any circumstance.
Yeah.
And so I think to increase my confidence of that, not knowing what change occurred tends to help. And so you do have somebody else does the change for you. You do a blind test. I think that's advantageous. And if you could do it back and forth enough times with a high enough confidence, you could probably get a pretty good picture
You
of
and me just listen.
whether or not
Yeah,
there's
well-
more detail.
Well, there's more to that. I know, at least with Eric, he comes to me and he's like, come and listen to this.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't tell me what I'm listening for, and then I'll tell him.
Right.
And then if he's like, okay, yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah,
then
that kind of
That helps.
excludes
Yeah.
all bias
Yeah.
right there.
Well,
Sometimes you hear a change, but most of the time you're going to go and say, I don't hear anything. What's the big deal? What do you want? What are we after here?
Actually, most of the times we do get it,
Yeah.
a change happen.
usually,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
More times than not.
Because
Right.
I could have something that I think is a really minor difference, and I go to him just to make sure that I'm not crazy, and he tells me what changed. I tell him nothing, of course.
Yeah, like our internal systems here, we know pretty good. We're used to listening, plugging
Yeah.
stuff in over in the QC room. We might have an amp sitting over here. You've got something in the back in the shop. Or hell, if it gets really critical, you just take it home with you.
Yeah.
Take your homework,
Right.
take your listening home with you and try it out. But yeah.
Well, I think the other thing is fatigue definitely sets in. So I like to just listen for 5 minutes, form a general conclusion,
Right.
walk away,
Right.
come back an hour later, and
Yeah.
see if I think the same thing.
Yeah, you can't stress yourself out over trying to hear
Yeah.
detail. I see that a lot with
Yeah.
people who, if they're like, let's say they're A being two things, right? Which is probably one of the main reasons you want to listen for detail, right? Is you're trying to compare two things.
Yeah.
So therefore, the details are what matters, right? And after about 10 or 15 minutes, you could pull your hair out, especially if you're swapping back and forth. It's never a good idea
Yeah.
to go back and forth a lot every
goes
minute
downhill
or so.
quick.
Yeah.
You're better off listening for a while. All right, try different tracks on it, see what it's doing, even if it's a day or days, and if you got the time, and then put the other piece in, a component that you're A-being, and then live with that for a bit. You get more of a feel for that, rather than trying to pick out any particular flaw, or goodness in it. It goes either way, but yeah, I prefer to take my time with something. I mean, at our point, we're pretty good at this. You can pretty much know within a short period of time of what changed and if it's going in the right direction, But for a lot of people, it's they haven't done that for a living.
Yeah.
They haven't done it for years.
Well, yeah.
And so it takes a little bit of time. It takes practice. And yeah, you're right. Don't stress out over it. It's not going to get you anywhere. Your brain shuts down. And it's like tightening a muscle, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, you hit a point.
You got to walk away.
And you're like,
Yeah.
I can't tell anymore.
I run into that all the time.
Yeah.
So, all the time. I'll walk in the sound room or in my listening room at home, and I walk in. I could, I could think, I'm going to listen to some music. Sit down. First couple minutes, I'm like, I don't even want to feel. I just not in the mood. All of a sudden, I'm not in the mood, and for whatever reason, I know it's not going to go the right way, and I'll go watch TV or, catch something on the internet. See what's going on in the forums.
We should probably clarify that this is really all in reference to high-end gear, though. Because
Yeah.
there's minus there's pretty minor differences between bits of gear in the high-end space, typically.
Well, you could listen for detail on low-end stuff too.
Right,
but
that's what I'm getting at. But the differences
different-
are quite more significant, typically.
Well, yeah, that's true. They're subtle.
And so it's
They're more subtle and higher end, if
Right.
you ask me.
And so
Yeah.
you really need to try to do all these little mental gymnastics to ensure that what you're hearing is really there in the high end.
Right.
In the low end, sometimes it's super obvious.
Right.
And you could get somebody off the street, you give them 5 minutes, and they'll tell you without a doubt, over and over, repeatedly, blind, this is the difference between these two pieces of gear. So it really depends on what you're listening for. The high end gear, it's pretty subtle, it's pretty minor.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might think, well, that doesn't really make a big difference. And to some people, it doesn't make a difference at all.
No,
some
if you're
people,
at a level where it doesn't, you're kind of
some
lucky.
people don't care. It
You
doesn't
know?
matter, right?
Yeah.
But shocking to me is plenty of people, that trivial minor difference that so many people could just barely discern, it's all the difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge night
Yeah, because
and
they've
day
already
difference.
gone. It's like going up a ladder upstairs, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
to some
They've,
extent.
they've kept going up, and they've refined. They've spent the time and years usually to refine the system to get exactly the way they like it.
Yep.
So now it's easy to mess that up, first of all. So
Yeah.
making a change usually goes the wrong way if you're at a really high refined level, you know. But you're looking for that 1%, that
Yeah.
one possible percent, or even a small percentage of a percent, that you can go a little further with it, you know. So
Well, I find the closer you get to that 1% left goal, the more time you need to give between listening sessions.
absolutely.
So sometimes
Months.
it's just like, don't listen to anything for not hours, days, just
Yeah.
like 2-3 days of
Taking a break, you mean?
Yeah. And then when you come back, it's like, oh, this still sounds amazing. 2 days later,
That's
after
true.
not listening to anything.
Yeah,
And then they're like, all right, I think that's a good change then.
yeah.
But yeah, I think the closer you get to the end of your journey, the longer you need to put
I guess
in.
it depends on how big of a change it is.
Yeah.
Like,
For sure.
you know, listening for detail for someone who's just getting started at it or is fairly new at it, you know, whoever it might be, you know, if you've never done any real critical listening,
Yeah.
you know, and really honed in on what to listen for. And you know what? That's probably what the question is about, really, if you think about it. What are you listening for when it comes to detail?
Yeah.
And that's probably something we should cover.
An interesting thing is at shows, we see this all the time. You have a headphone that's particularly bright or maybe even dark, and people could perceive that as being excessively detailed or maybe even a lack of detail. They tend to confuse the frequency response of the headphone with detail, but they're very different things. It's surprisingly easier than I think most people realize to actually discern detail. We frequently see people that are new to the sport coming in, and this is the first time they've actually listened to a high-end headphone, or one of the first times they listen
You mean
to
they
high-end.
confuse brightness with detail?
Right.
And they think the brighter it is,
They
the
think-
more highs it has, the more detail
Yeah.
it is, which technically it is, but it's actually
it's challenging.
it's a skewed frequency response.
It can make it
It's-
easier for you to
It's usually
discern
bright
detail.
because it doesn't do the bass well, or but yeah,
It's kind of like anything, like a monitor or something like that. You could have a higher resolution monitor, but if it's really dim, it's hard to see the resolution a lot of times, right? So turning the volume up, in this case, might make you perceive as there being more detail.
well, louder volume does make it easier.
Makes
Well,
it
yeah.
easier.
You know, in fact, you could use that as a test. Don't turn it up too high and blow things up. But bottom line is that you could use volume as a test, right? I mean, you know what
Yeah.
happens when you turn it up,
Yeah.
right? What?
Well, it gets louder.
It does, yeah.
But yeah, you can hear all the quieter things.
Well, yeah, it gets louder, but yeah, right. Well, that's the thing. You can hear, and you can hear more of the flaws too.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if that's what you're looking for. But I mean, if you're listening to something for detail, turning it up definitely gives you more detail.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
gives
but
you
that's
more
a challenge.
information. But yeah,
That's a big part of the challenge, though, because you could have a system that you could perceive as being more detailed, and all it really is it's more comfortable at higher volumes. And so
actually, that's a
you're-
good thing. If
I'm
you
not
can turn the
saying that's
system up
bad.
and it doesn't go the wrong way,
That's not
you
necessarily a
probably
bad
got a
thing.
pretty good system.
But that
going
doesn't mean
there.
it's more detail. And so you could see how this could be a term that would be very easily confused.
Right.
It's easier for you to resolve detail as a human as the volume goes up. It kind of increases
Sure.
the signal to noise
To a
effectively,
point where
right?
you can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
till it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's more detailed. You could have something that's a really muffled high-end range, and it could be actually more detailed than something that has a very sparkly treble.
Yeah, well, again, and you know, think about if you talk about detail too, and since it's more of a basic concept we're talking about, you got to consider volume. You know, the volume setting needs to be proper for each track. You know, and details in the ears and the mind of the beholder. So, you're basically, I find myself adjusting volume for every track. I mean, do you do that?
Yeah.
I can't stand not being near the volume control.
Yeah.
You know, because all the recordings vary a bit and what you're listening to, and some recordings are more annoying than others. Some aren't. So some you're turning up, right? 'Cause they're great. They're
Which could be
smooth.
bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah, all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah.
And then, but other recordings are just all of a sudden they get bright out of nowhere. You know, the intro's great, and then all of a sudden someone's just too hot on the mic on a recording, and just screams at you. It's like shit. So I've always found that I need a volume control in front of me, you know, to adjust it. But that again, that volume setting is definitely a part of detail. It's a part of what you're listening to and for, and it's got to be adjusted on track by track, and then averaged out.
Well, especially if you're like listening to two different headphones and comparing them, and they obviously won't have the same volume at the same
For
level.
sure,
you
yeah.
know?
In fact, always turn the
So,
volume
yeah.
to nothing before you plug a headphone in. Because
Yeah.
boom.
So,
But yeah, well, that's true. I mean, and that's the confusing part. That's true. If you come into an unknown system with an unknown headphone, you really don't know where it stands, do you? In terms of what's properly detailed and what isn't. I don't know. Turning the volume up till it gets annoying is a good test. It will pick out the flaws. And the next step after that would be to figure out where, if you have excessive detail, you got to figure out where that's coming from. Is it the speakers or the headphones?
well, that's the hard part.
Is it the amp? Is it the source? Is it the damn track? So yeah, and that you have to average over multiple systems, different headphones. So you know, like you and me, we get an idea of it from listening to tracks on all different systems, right?
Yeah.
We know what this track sounds like on 50 different systems,
Yeah.
and at some point, you know what the track sounds like
Yeah, you kind of just average it
because
across all the
you
systems.
know what it's doing well and what it's doing wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so if you put it into something and it does something really well, that's pretty good because the track's good at that to begin with, and now it's become exceptional because of this change of gear. And the opposite's true too, right?
Well, yeah. It's like, oh, it's not doing that thing that it normally does.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All of a sudden you don't hear it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
something's lacking
Yeah.
here. It's missing detail or lacking detail.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it's something you learn, you gain with experience, you know, as to how detailed something should be versus not. And then like with us, we tune our headphones, right, subjectively.
Yeah.
So I mean, what are you listening for when we're doing that? You're listening for detail. That's
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know, like, you find tracks that have, like, really quiet things, usually, like, in the distance. And then, like, on some headphones, you literally can't hear them as hard. You could listen as hard as you can, and you can't hear it at all.
Right.
And then, you know, if you get a really good headphone, then you could hear it clear as day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's probably the easiest
All
way.
this crap going on in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
They probably didn't even heard when they were mixing
Well, that's
it.
the thing, yeah.
That's actually a pretty good point, though.
But, yeah, I mean, literally, you can't. I mean, I've tried it on lower-end headphones where it's like, all right, I know it's there. I've
Right,
heard it.
Right.
And then it's like, you're listening as hard as you can, and you can't hear anything.
Yeah. Sometimes when you do hear it in a high end system, and you go back to low end, all of a sudden that you know it's there,
Yeah.
you can pick it out.
Yeah,
You
sometimes.
it just never stood out
Right,
before.
right.
I know a lot of people mention that, and it's
Yeah.
true. That's experience level.
Yeah.
That is how you grow with experiences. The more of those experiences you have, where something's pulled out of the muck, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I didn't even know that was there. Now you go back to other systems, and you, like you said,
Yeah.
you either hear it or you don't.
Yeah.
If you can't even discern it,
Yeah.
then that's a lack of detail.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we covered a pretty good amount. We could go on and on, but it really boils down to trying different things and understanding where the details are coming from, and then figuring out, like you said, we started with reference tracks, right? And use some tracks and then try to draw more detail out of that with different systems, different headphones. See if you can pull more information out of that track or even a few tracks,
Yeah.
right? Without going overboard, without getting annoying. That's really the goal of assembling a high-end system, is you're trying to extract as much information from those recordings as you can without getting annoying, without it getting bright or being forced at you. You don't want information forced. And that's nuance, that's finesse, that's refinement. That's what we're after, where you can turn up the volume and it just gets better.
Yep.
It doesn't get annoying. That's what you're really after. So anyway, yeah, it's cool talking about that one. Thanks for joining us once again on Top of the Line, and by all means subscribe to our channel because we always got more coming for you. Thank you.
I think we were more relieved than anything.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, search is over. Fine,
right,
good.
finally.
Good with it. I'm good.
And it started with the letter A, which
Yeah.
is great. We're A, B. We're at the top of the alphabet. There's not a hell of a lot of names.
I mean, we did have to hit a point where we knew we would actually have a viable product to sell before we even had to come up with
Yeah,
a name.
that's
though.
Yeah, that's pretty much where it was, I
So-
guess. Because at this point, by the time we realized we needed a name, we should probably come up with a name. It was probably 2-3 years or something like that into the project, somewhere
Yeah.
in that ballpark.